The relentless bombardment shook the ancient archives once more. Dust and fragments of crystalline knowledge matrices rained down from the vaulted ceiling as Elder Lyra steadied herself against a pillar of living stone. Her multifaceted eyes reflected the dim emergency lights that still functioned in the deepest chambers of the Cthar repository of ancestral wisdom. "How much longer can the shields hold, Commander?" she asked, her voice betraying the exhaustion of 14 cycles of continuous siege. Commander Voral's scaled skin had lost its characteristic iridescence, now appearing ashen under the flickering lights. "Hours at most, Elder. The Consortium's quantum disruptors have nearly penetrated our final defensive layer. They're being methodical." A bitter understanding passed between them. The methodical destruction was intentional, a drawn-out execution designed to extract maximum terror before the inevitable end. Not content with simple annihilation, the Consortium wanted the Cthar to suffer, to witness the systematic erasure of their 15,000-year civilization. Outside, beyond the shimmering, weakening dome that protected the last Cthar stronghold, the sleek, angular warships of the Consortium hung in perfect formation. Their gleaming black hulls absorbed rather than reflected light, creating voids in the starscape. Occasional pulses of concentrated energy lashed out from their weapon arrays, each strike precisely calculated to incrementally weaken rather than immediately breach the shields. "They're toying with us," Voral said, mandibles clicking in restrained anger. The tactical advantage of a swift victory means nothing to them compared to the pleasure of watching us cower. Lyra moved deeper into the circular chamber, her ceremonial robes dragging through the debris that had fallen from the damaged architecture. The walls around them, once alive with flowing data and ancestral wisdom, now displayed only fragmented images and corrupted text. "Have we received any response to our distress calls?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "None," Voral replied. "The Consortium has blocked all conventional communication channels. The neighboring systems that might have helped, they're either already subjugated or too frightened to oppose the Alliance." Lyra reached the center of the chamber, where a crystalline pedestal rose from the floor. "How many of our people remain?" "Less than 10,000 across all sanctuary zones. We've lost contact with 3 of the underground shelters in the eastern continent. 10,000 from a population that once numbered billions. The Cthar, philosophers and archivists of the galaxy, reduced to a remnant hiding beneath their shattered cities. Their crime: preserving knowledge the Consortium deemed dangerous, historical accounts that contradicted the official narrative, cultural artifacts that inspired resistance, and most damning of all, records of those who came before. Records of the silent ones." Another bombardment sequence began, more intense than the previous. The chamber trembled violently, and several of the ancient data crystals shattered, their stored wisdom forever lost. "Elder, we must evacuate you to the final fallback position," Voral insisted, moving toward her with protective intent. Lyra raised a 3-fingered hand to stop him. "There is no fallback position, Commander. Not anymore. But the contingency protocols were designed for a different kind of defeat." Lyra's inner eyelids closed momentarily in a Cthar expression of profound sorrow. "This is extinction, Voral. The Consortium won't stop until we and everything we preserve are utterly erased." Voral's military discipline faltered briefly. "Then we have failed our ancestors." "Perhaps," Lyra said, her gaze drifting to a sealed door at the far end of the chamber, a door that hadn't been opened in thousands of years. "Or perhaps there is one final option." She moved toward the ancient door, pressing her palm against its surface. Bioluminescent patterns spread from her touch, ancient recognition protocols activating after millennia of dormancy. "Elder, what are you doing? That section has been sealed since before my great-grandmother's hatching. It contains knowledge deemed too dangerous even by our own ancestors," Lyra explained as the door began to recede into the wall. "Protocols and artifacts from the Age of Consequence, when a galaxy nearly destroyed itself in the War of Extinction." Voral's protective instincts flared. "The Forbidden Archives? Elder, the texts speak of technologies and entities that could destroy us. Lyra laughed bitterly. Look around you, Commander. Destruction is already here. The door completed its retraction, revealing a small, octagonal chamber beyond. Unlike the organic architecture that characterized Cthar construction, this room was built of materials that seemed to absorb both light and sound. At its center stood a simple pedestal supporting what appeared to be a metallic sphere, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. What is it? Vorl asked, instinctively keeping his distance. A relic from those we call the Silent Ones, Lyra replied, approaching the sphere with reverence. Humanity. Vorl involuntarily stepped back. The Destroyers? But they're just myths, cautionary tales to warn against technological hubris. They were real, Lyra countered, carefully lifting the sphere from its resting place. As real as you or I. 4,000 years ago, they dominated the galaxy with technology and power we can scarcely comprehend. Then, at the height of their civilization, they simply withdrew, disappeared into the darkness between stars, leaving behind only whispers and relics like this one. The sphere began to emit a faint hum as Lyra held it. Subtle lines of blue energy traced the geometric patterns on its surface. Before they disappeared, they left behind protocols, agreements with the elder races, including our ancestors. One such protocol was activated through devices like this. The Cthar called it the Call, a desperate measure to be used only in the most dire circumstances. Another bombardment sequence shook the archives. This time, warning signals blared throughout the chamber. Elder, the shields are failing. We have minutes, not hours, Vorl reported, his tactical display projecting a rapidly deteriorating situation. Lyra held the sphere before her. Commander, gather our remaining scholars. They must witness this. If we succeed, they will need to understand what comes next. If we fail, Vorl hesitated only briefly before complying, disappearing down a connecting corridor. Alone with the ancient artifact, Elder Lyra began the ritual described in the oldest texts of her people. Her voice rose in a melodic chant that resonated with the humming sphere. The strange symbols on its surface brightened in response to specific harmonic patterns in her voice. From silence we call you. From darkness we seek you. By the covenant of stars and the oath of ages, we awaken those who watch from beyond. With each phrase, the sphere's glow intensified. The metal itself seemed to become more fluid, less solid, as if transforming into something that existed in multiple states simultaneously. When Vorl returned with a handful of surviving scholars, they found Lyra suspended in midair, the sphere floating before her, now a brilliant star of blue-white energy that cast no shadows. "What have you done?" one of the scholars gasped. Lyra's voice, when she answered, seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I have called the Silent Ones. I have awakened humanity." The sphere collapsed in upon itself, imploding into a pinpoint of light that shot upward through the ceiling, through the faltering shields, and into the void beyond. A signal, ancient, weak, but carrying within it codes and protocols established millennia ago, began its lonely journey across the vast emptiness of space. Above the dying world of the Cthar, the consortium fleet continued its methodical bombardment, unaware that something fundamental had just changed in the equation of their victory. Admiral Zalter stood on the command bridge of the consortium flagship Inevitable Dominion, his tall, lean form silhouetted against the tactical hologram, displaying the ongoing subjugation of the Cthar homeworld. His four-fingered hands were clasped behind his back, the gray skin of his hairless head reflecting the red targeting indicators that dominated the display. "Status report," he commanded, his voice emotionless and precise. His executive officer, a member of the Vax species whose people had been among the first to be integrated into the consortium centuries ago, stepped forward. "The Cthar shields will fail within the next 20 minutes, Admiral. Our disruptor batteries continue to operate at optimal efficiency. Casualties? None, sir. The Cthar military capacity was neutralized in the first wave. Their remaining defensive measures are entirely passive. Zalter nodded slightly. As expected, their kind always valued knowledge over practical power. A fatal philosophical error. He gestured toward a section of the hologram. Once the shields fail, I want ground forces deployed to secure their central archives. Any surviving Cthar scholars are to be detained for processing. The rest of the population is expendable. Yes, Admiral. And ensure that our cultural purification teams are prepared for immediate deployment. I want every trace of their forbidden histories eliminated. The Vax officer hesitated momentarily. Sir, some of those archives date back thousands of years. They may contain scientific and historical knowledge of significant value to the consortium. Zalter turned slowly, fixing the officer with a cold stare. The consortium determines what knowledge has value, Commander Vex. The Cthar have persisted in preserving accounts that contradict our established historical narrative. Such dangerous misinformation cannot be allowed to exist. Of course, Admiral. I merely suggested that perhaps a more thorough examination might. Your suggestion is noted and dismissed, Zalter interrupted. The High Council's directive is absolute. The Cthar archives are to be purged, with only approved materials preserved for integration into our repositories. Vex lowered his gaze in submission. Understood, Admiral. A junior sensor officer suddenly straightened at her console, frowning at the readings before her. Sir, I'm detecting an unusual energy signature emanating from the surface of the planet, specifically from the region of their primary archive complex. Zalter's attention shifted to the officer. Elaborate. It appears to be some form of transmission, sir, but on a frequency band we don't typically monitor. It's unusual. Is it a weapon? Zalter demanded. Negative, sir. The energy levels are minimal. It appears to be a simple communication pulse, but using an extremely old protocol. Zalter dismissed the concern with a wave. A desperate attempt to call for help? No doubt. Let them waste their final moments on futile distress signals. No one in this sector would dare oppose the consortium. The sensor officer hesitated. Sir, the signal, it's not directed toward any of the nearby systems. Its trajectory suggests it's aimed toward the galactic core, specifically toward the interdiction zone. A momentary silence fell over the bridge. The interdiction zone, that vast region of space declared off-limits by the consortium centuries ago. The region that, according to official history, contained nothing of value, only dangerous stellar phenomena and dead worlds. Zalter's expression hardened, a fascinating final act of defiance. It sent a cry for help into empty space. But behind his dismissive words, a flicker of unease passed through him. The interdiction zone had not always been empty, not according to the classified histories accessible only to those of his rank. Once, long ago, it had been the domain of the most powerful civilization the galaxy had ever known. But that was myth, not reality. Cautionary tales invented to inspire obedience and respect for the natural order that the consortium maintained. Continue the bombardment sequence, he ordered. I want those shields down on schedule. As the bridge crew returned to their duties, a junior intelligence analyst named Marek sat at his monitoring station in the lower deck, staring at his display with increasing concern. Unlike the senior officers, Marek's species, the Arthan, had been conquered relatively recently, within his grandfather's lifetime. While outwardly loyal to the consortium, many Arthans secretly preserved their heritage and maintained a healthy skepticism of official narratives. Marek had been tasked with routine monitoring of communication frequencies during the siege, a menial assignment given to junior officers. But his attention had been caught by the strange signal detected from the planet's surface. While the senior officers had dismissed it, something about its structure seemed hauntingly familiar to Marek. Carefully, making sure none of his superiors were watching, he began running the signal pattern through the classified database he had access to. The system returned no matches initially, but Marek persisted, adjusting the search parameters to include historical archives. Finally, a single reference appeared on his screen, heavily redacted, but containing enough information to send a chill through his insectoid body. The signal pattern matched fragments of what the database called the Humanity Protocol, a theoretical communication system dating back for millennia. Humanity. The word itself was classified, rarely mentioned even in secure consortium communications. According to official history, they were merely a primitive species that had destroyed themselves through technological mismanagement. But unofficial accounts, those whispered among the conquered peoples of the consortium, told a different story. They spoke of humanity as a power that had once ruled the stars with benevolence and terrible strength in equal measure. A civilization that had withdrawn from the galactic stage not through destruction, but by choice, leaving behind warnings and promises that had faded into myth. Marek glanced up at the command platform, where Admiral Zalter continued to oversee the bombardment. Should he report what he had found? The correct answer, according to consortium protocol, was unquestionably yes. But something deeper, perhaps the remnants of his people's independence, made him hesitate. If the myths contained even a fragment of truth, the signals sent by the Cthar might have consequences that Admiral Zalter, in his dogmatic confidence, could not begin to imagine. Marek made his decision. He closed the search window, erased the logs of his query, and returned to his assigned tasks. But inside, a question burned. What if the Silent Ones were listening after all? In the vastness of space, the Cthar signal traveled, a whisper against the roar of stellar radiation and cosmic background noise. By any rational assessment, it should have dissipated into meaningless static long before reaching its intended destination. The power behind it was minimal, the technology used to generate it primitive compared to modern consortium capabilities. Yet as it passed certain points in the void, something unexpected happened. Ancient, dormant constructs, relics of a bygone era, stirred to life briefly. Automated relay stations, hidden in the shadows of uninhabited systems, captured the faint signal, amplified it, and sent it onward with renewed strength. Each relay added coded information to the original message, coordinates, tactical assessments, identity confirmations. What had begun as a desperate plea transformed into a comprehensive briefing as it traveled deeper into regions of space that no sentient being had visited in thousands of years. In a system without a name, orbiting a star deliberately removed from all but the most classified star charts, the enhanced signal finally reached its destination, a massive structure floating in the shadow of a gas giant. From a distance, it might have been mistaken for a small moon or asteroid, its surface dark and seemingly lifeless. But as the signal washed over it, seams of light began to appear across its surface, revealing geometric patterns of stunning complexity. Deep within the structure, systems that had lain dormant for millennia initiated activation sequences. An intelligence awoke, not biological, not entirely artificial, but something that existed in the space between classifications. It processed the incoming signal, analyzed the attached data, and reached a conclusion. Protocol conditions had been met. The call had been made. Throughout the structure, massive manufacturing and assembly systems began to power up. Maintenance drones swarmed through vast chambers where sleek vessels waited in perfect preservation. Energy reactors that operated on principles beyond the understanding of current galactic science came online, generating power that could fuel a small sun. And in the deepest chamber of the facility, a communication array activated, sending a signal not through conventional space but through dimensional folds that bypassed normal limitations of distance. The message was simple, encoded in a language no living being in the galaxy still spoke. Asterisk, the call has been received. Awakening protocols initiated. The vigil resumes. Asterisk. In distant regions of space, similar facilities received the transmission and began their own activation sequences. A network that had lain dormant for 4,000 years stirred to life, each node confirming readiness to the others. Humanity, though absent in body, had never truly abandoned their watch. Back on the bridge of the inevitable Dominion, the final bombardment sequence was underway. The Cthar shields had weakened to the point of collapse, Their once brilliant energy dome now flickering pathetically against the sustained assault. Prepare ground forces for immediate deployment, Admiral Zalter ordered, satisfaction evident in his posture, if not his expression. I want the Central Archives secured within the hour. Yes, Admiral, Commander Vex acknowledged, relaying the orders to the troop carriers waiting in the lower orbit. The sensor officer who had previously reported the unusual transmission suddenly frowned at her console again. Sir, I'm detecting gravimetric anomalies at the edge of the system. Zalter turned, irritation flashing across his features. Specify. Multiple distortions forming approximately 2 light minutes from our position. They appear to be. I'm not sure what they are, sir. The readings don't correspond to any known phenomena in our database. Natural occurrence or artificial? Zalter demanded. The patterns suggest artificial origin, sir, but the scale is... The officer hesitated. The scale is unprecedented. Before Zalter could respond, the tactical officer interrupted. Admiral, new contacts appearing at the coordinates of the gravimetric distortions. Many contacts. Reading. Sir, I'm not sure this is correct. The system is showing thousands of vessels. Thousands? Zalter's discipline cracked slightly, his voice rising. That's impossible. No fleet of that size could approach without detection. Recalibrate your sensors. Sensors are functioning correctly, sir, the tactical officer insisted, her voice tight with tension. The vessels appeared simultaneously at multiple points. They didn't approach, they simply materialized. The main view screen shifted to show the region of space where the anomalies had been detected. What? It displayed silenced every voice on the bridge. Against the backdrop of stars hung a vast armada of ships unlike any in known space. They were massive, dwarfing even the consortium dreadnoughts, with sleek, almost organic curves that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Their surfaces displayed no obvious weapon emplacements, no engine exhausts, no communications arrays. They were seamless, perfect, and utterly alien. Yet something about their design triggered recognition in the collective memory of the bridge crew, shapes seen in ancient warning symbols, in classified file headers, in the nightmares of those who studied forbidden histories. Impossible, Zalter whispered, all pretense of control abandoned. The tactical officer's voice shook as she reported, no energy emissions detected, no propulsion signatures, no communication attempts. They're just there. Hail them, Zalter ordered, struggling to regain his composure. All frequencies. The communications officer complied, sending standard consortium greeting protocols across the electromagnetic spectrum. No response came. Sir, the tactical officer said, they're moving. On the view screen, the massive vessels had indeed begun to change position. With a grace that defied their size, they were forming a new configuration, a perfect barrier between the consortium fleet and the Cthar planet. They're blocking our bombardment vectors, Commander Vex observed, his professional assessment belying the fear evident in his posture. Zalter's mind raced through possibilities. A previously unknown power making a dramatic entrance? Impossible. The consortium's intelligence network was too thorough. A new weapons system deployed by allies of the Cthar? But the Cthar had no allies left. A mass hallucination or sensor malfunction. The simultaneous failure of all systems seemed equally impossible, which left only one explanation, one that Zalter's rational mind rejected even as ancient instincts screamed warnings. Sir, the communications officer interrupted his thoughts. We're receiving a transmission from the Cthar surface. It's Elder Lyra requesting to speak with you. Zalter hesitated only briefly. Perhaps the Cthar leader could provide answers. Put her through. The holographic display shifted to show Elder Lyra, her ancient features calm despite the destruction visible around her. Admiral Zalter, she acknowledged with formal politeness. I see you have visitors. What have you done? Zalter demanded. Where are those vessels? They're the response to the call, Lyra replied simply. The Silent Ones have returned, as the ancient text said they would when summoned by those under their protection. Protection? Zalter scoffed. though his voice lacked conviction. The Kthar are under consortium jurisdiction. There are no other recognized protectorates in this sector. The agreements that bind the Silent Ones predate your consortium by thousands of years, Admiral, Lyra explained. When humanity withdrew from galactic affairs, they left behind protocols, promises to intervene should certain conditions be met. The genocidal destruction of a protected species is one such condition. Zalter's mind reeled at the casual confirmation of what he had begun to suspect. Humanity is a myth, he insisted. A cautionary tale, nothing more. Lyra's expression showed something close to pity. Then who, Admiral, are those ships that now stand between your fleet and my people? Before Zalter could respond, the tactical officer called out with renewed urgency. Sir, a squadron of vessels is breaking away from the main fleet, moving toward our position. On the screen, a group of smaller ships, though still larger than the consortium's largest cruisers, separated from the mysterious armada and accelerated toward the inevitable Dominion and its support vessels. Raise shields, Zalter ordered. Bring weapons to full readiness. But do not fire without my explicit command. The approaching vessels displayed the same disturbing characteristics as the larger ships. No visible propulsion systems, no energy signatures, yet moving with impossible speed and precision. They've taken position around our fleet, sir, the tactical officer reported. We're surrounded. Have they locked weapons on us? Zalter asked. I cannot detect any targeting systems, sir. In fact, I cannot detect any weapons systems at all. That was perhaps the most disturbing aspect, the complete absence of recognizable military technology on vessels that were clearly designed for overwhelming power projection. Admiral, the communications officer said, we're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. Audio only, on all frequencies simultaneously. Zalter straightened his uniform, aware that this moment would likely define his career, assuming he survived it. Put it through. A voice filled the bridge, flat, emotionless, neither clearly male nor female, neither young nor old. It spoke in perfect consortium standard, yet with subtle harmonic undertones that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the brain. Consortium Armada designation Alpha 779, under command of Admiral Zalter. This is a notification of intervention under Protocol 37A of the Guardian Directive. The species known as Kthar falls under protected status according to the Treaty of Remembrance, co-signed by their ancestors and the Human Accord 4,327 standard years ago. Your actions constitute a Class 1 violation of this treaty. The voice paused, as if allowing time for this information to be processed. Withdrawal of all consortium forces from Kthar space is required immediately. Non-compliance will result in appropriate countermeasures. You have 15 standard minutes to begin evacuation procedures. The transmission ended, leaving a silence so profound that Zalter could hear the rapid breathing of his bridge crew. Sir, Commander Vex ventured after a moment. How should we respond? Zalter's mind worked furiously. The appearance of this armada had upset every calculation, every assumption upon which the campaign against the Kthar had been based. Yet to retreat based on threats from an unknown entity, even one of such overwhelming apparent power, would be a humiliation that the Consortium High Council would never tolerate. We do not recognize the authority of any human accord, Zalter declared, raising his voice to project confidence he no longer felt. The Consortium is the sole legitimate governing body in this quadrant. These intruders, whatever their origin, have no jurisdiction here. He turned to the tactical officer. Target the lead vessel of the intercepting squadron. Energy weapons only, minimum power. A demonstration, not an attack. Let's see if these ghosts are as formidable as they appear. Sir, the tactical officer protested. We have no information about their defensive capabilities or how they might interpret such an action. They have made threats against a consortium battle group, Zalter countered. We must establish that we will not be intimidated by phantoms and legends. Execute my order. With visible reluctance, the tactical officer programmed the targeting solution. Target locked. Minimal power settings confirmed. Fire, Zalter commanded. A single beam of concentrated energy lanced out from the inevitable Dominion's primary emitter, directed at the lead vessel of the unknown squadron. It was deliberately underpowered, a warning shot intended to demonstrate resolve rather than inflict damage. What happened next would be replayed and analyzed in consortium war colleges for decades to come. The energy beam, moving at near light speed, never reached its target. Approximately halfway between the ships, the beam simply stopped. Not absorbed, not deflected, stopped, as if it had hit an invisible wall. The energy hung suspended in space for a moment, a frozen spear of light, before collapsing in upon itself and vanishing. What just happened? Zalter demanded, his composure finally cracking. Unknown, sir, the tactical officer replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The laws of physics don't allow for. She was interrupted by alerts blaring across multiple stations. Sir, our targeting systems are offline. Weapons are powering down automatically. Engineering reports quantum fluctuations in the shield generators. Shields failing. Navigation systems compromised. We've lost propulsion control. Throughout the consortium fleet, similar reports flooded in. Ship after ship reported critical systems failing or behaving erratically, all without any detectable attack or energy signature from the surrounding vessels. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the cascade of failures stopped. The bridge of the inevitable Dominion fell silent save for the occasional alert tone from the crippled systems. Admiral Zalter stood frozen, staring at the tactical display that showed his proud fleet now effectively neutered, surrounded by vessels that had not fired a single shot. The communications officer broke the silence. Admiral, another transmission incoming. Without waiting for authorization, she put it through. The same emotionless voice filled the bridge once more. Your demonstration has been acknowledged. Our response has been proportional and targeted. Critical systems have been temporarily disabled. No permanent damage has been inflicted. No lives have been taken. A pause, then. We will now demonstrate the alternative. Before anyone could react, a new alert sounded. Proximity warnings from one of the consortium's destroyer-class vessels. The Relentless Doctrine positioned near the edge of the formation. On the view screen, the crew of the inevitable Dominion watched in horror as space itself seemed to fold around the destroyer. There was no explosion, no energy discharge, no conventional attack of any kind. Instead, a distortion formed around the vessel, as if reality itself rejected its presence. For a brief moment, the ship appeared to exist in multiple states simultaneously, intact in one instant, fragmented the next, the pieces themselves blurring between existence and non-existence. Then, with a finality that defied comprehension, the Relentless Doctrine simply ceased to be. Where a warship carrying over 2,000 crew had been, there was now only empty space. No debris, no radiation, no evidence that the vessel had ever existed beyond the horrified memory of those who had witnessed its erasure. 8,672 standard minutes remaining to complete your withdrawal. The voice continued, as if the demonstration had been nothing more than a minor interruption. Further resistance will result in the application of irreversible countermeasures to all consortium vessels in this system. This time, when the transmission ended, no one on the bridge moved or spoke. The tactical display showed the impossible truth. A consortium destroyer, pride of the fleet, had been removed from existence without apparent effort or conventional weaponry. Admiral Zalter, the architect of a dozen successful campaigns, conqueror of rebellious systems and enforcer of consortium will, found himself facing the one experience he had never prepared for: absolute, undeniable defeat. Send the withdrawal code, he ordered, his voice hollow. All vessels to retreat to the rally point once systems are restored. No one questioned the order. No one reminded him of the High Council's expectations or the consequences of failure. In the face of what they had just witnessed, such concerns seemed laughably insignificant. As the communications officer transmitted the retreat signal, Zalter turned to look at the view screen once more at the silent, implacable vessels that had undone his life's work in the span of minutes. Humanity, not extinct, not mythical, but withdrawn. Watching, waiting, and now awoken. The galaxy he thought he understood had just become infinitely more complex and dangerous. On the surface of the Cthar homeworld, Elder Lyra stood amid the ruins of what had once been the grand entrance to the repository of ancestral wisdom. Around her, surviving Cthar emerged from their shelters, gazing upward at the sky where, visible even through the atmosphere, the vast armada of humanity hung in silent vigilance. Commander Vorl approached, his posture showing a mixture of relief and deep unease. The consortium fleet is withdrawing. Their bombardment has ceased completely. Lyra nodded, her ancient eyes fixed on the heavens. As the text promised, Elder, Vorl said hesitantly, "What happens now? What will they want from us in return for this intervention?" Before Lyra could answer, a point of light appeared in the sky, rapidly descending toward their position. The Cthar reflexively moved back, centuries of instinct regarding orbital objects as threats rather than visitors. The light resolved into a small craft unlike any they had seen before. It seemed to phase between solidity and energy, its boundaries fluid rather than fixed. It came to rest hovering just above the ground before them, making no sound, disturbing not even the dust beneath it. A section of the craft's surface rippled and opened, and a figure emerged. Humanoid in general form, but clearly not biologically human in the ancient sense. Its body appeared to be composed of material that shifted between solid matter and pure energy, with currents of light flowing beneath a semi-transparent exterior. It had no visible face in the conventional sense, merely a smooth surface where facial features might be expected, occasionally rippling with patterns of light that suggested expressions. Elder Lyra of the Cthar, the being said, its voice similar to the one that had addressed the consortium fleet. "The call has been answered." Lyra stepped forward, performing the ritual greeting described in the ancient texts. "We express profound gratitude for your intervention, guardian of humanity. We had feared the covenant forgotten after so many millennia." "Humanity does not forget its promises," the being replied. "Though we chose to withdraw from direct participation in galactic affairs, the protocols established before our departure remain in effect. The Cthar were among those who helped facilitate our transition. That debt is remembered." Vorl, overcoming his initial shock, moved to stand beside Lyra. "Are you human?" The being turned its featureless face toward him. "I'm a representative interface. The entity you perceive is a projection designed for interaction with biological consciousnesses. Human is no longer a purely biological classification." Lyra intervened, seeing Vorl's confusion. "The texts speak of humanity's final transformation, a transcendence beyond conventional physical forms. A simplification, but essentially correct," the representative acknowledged. "After achieving technological saturation, biological limitations became optional for our species. Most chose to evolve beyond them." "And you have been watching all this time?" Vorl asked, struggling to comprehend the implications. "Observing, not interfering unless specific conditions were met." The representative gestured toward the sky where the human armada remained visible. "The call activated protocols dormant for 4 millennia. Response facilities throughout the interdiction zone awakened." The vigil resumed. Lyra bowed her head slightly. "We activated the call in our most desperate hour. We had no other hope. The protocol functioned as designed," the representative stated. "However, there are consequences to this intervention that must be addressed." A ripple of unease passed through the gathered Cthar. Lyra's inner eyelids flickered nervously. "What consequences?" "The return of human presence to active galactic affairs alters the established equilibrium. The consortium will retreat temporarily, but they will adapt. Other powers will respond to our reemergence. A new paradigm is inevitable." The representative turned, gesturing toward the ruined cityscape visible beyond the repository complex. The Kthar will be protected during the transition period. Resources will be provided for reconstruction. Knowledge preserved in your archives will be secured against future attempts at cultural genocide. Relief washed through the assembled Kthar, but Lyra remained cautious. And what will be asked of us in return? 2 requirements, the representative stated. First, the continuation of your role as archivists. The preservation of historical truth remains valuable, particularly during periods of significant change. Lyra nodded. This was the core of Kthar identity. They would have continued this work regardless. And the second requirement, transmission of a message throughout known space, the representative said. All species must understand the new parameters. With a gesture from the featureless being, a holographic display formed in the air between them, showing text in multiple languages. It was simple, direct, and would fundamentally reshape galactic politics for generations to come. Asterisk, the silent vigil has ended. Humanity has returned to active oversight of protected regions. The covenants established before the silence remain in effect. Those who threaten protected species or civilizations will face intervention. Humanity seeks no territory, no resources, no subjugation, only compliance with the ancient agreements. Let those who would bring destruction remember, we are watching. Asterisk, as the holographic message faded, Lyra felt the weight of what she had done settle fully upon her shoulders. This message will destabilize the current order, she observed quietly. Yes, the representative acknowledged without inflection. The consortium's hegemony was built on the absence of counterbalance. That absence has ended. Commander Vorel stepped forward, military pragmatism overcoming his awe. The consortium will return. Perhaps not immediately, but eventually. They cannot allow this challenge to their authority to stand. They will attempt to adapt, the representative agreed. Analysis suggests 3 probable responses: technological acceleration to match perceived human capabilities, diplomatic initiatives to establish new agreements, or coalition building with other powers to present united opposition. And how will humanity respond to these efforts? Lyra asked. The representative's surface rippled with patterns that might have been the equivalent of a thoughtful expression. That will depend on their nature and intent. Humanity did not withdraw from galactic affairs because we sought isolation for its own sake. We withdrew because our continued presence was becoming detrimental to the natural development of younger species. It gestured toward the sky, where some of the massive vessels were already beginning to fade from view, returning to whatever dimensional state had hidden them for millennia. The majority of our presence will return to observational status. A minimal interface force will remain to oversee the protection of the Kthar and other designated species. Direct intervention will occur only when absolutely necessary. Lyra sensed there was more to this explanation than the representative was sharing. Deeper reasons for humanity's long absence and reluctant return. But she was wise enough to recognize when some knowledge remained beyond her reach. What should we tell our people? She asked instead. The truth, the representative replied simply. That you activated an ancient protocol. That the response was as promised in your historical records. That the Kthar are now under protection. But the galaxy has become more complex and uncertain as a result. With that, the representative began to move back toward its craft. Reconstruction resources will arrive within 1 standard day. A direct communication channel with human oversight systems has been established through the artifact you activated. Use it only in genuine need. Before entering the craft, the being paused and turned back. Elder Lyra, your decision to activate the call was made to save your species from extinction. That immediate goal has been achieved. However, the long-term consequences of reintroducing human influence to active galactic affairs cannot be fully predicted. Even our most advanced projection systems can only calculate probabilities, not certainties. For the first time, the representative's tone carried something like emotion, a subtle resonance that suggested concern, perhaps even regret. 4,000 years ago, humanity withdrew because our presence had become too dominant, our power too absolute. Younger species lived in our shadow rather than finding their own path. Our departure was meant to allow natural development and diversity of civilization models. Lyra understood the implication. You fear that your return may once again stifle such development. It is a significant probability, the representative acknowledged. Balance is difficult to achieve when disparity of power is extreme. With that final observation, the being entered its craft, which rippled closed around it. The vehicle rose silently into the air, accelerating upward until it was indistinguishable from the stars above. Left behind, the Cthar faced a future suddenly, drastically altered, saved from annihilation, but now part of a new galactic equation whose solution remained unknown. In the following days, the consortium fleet regrouped at a designated fallback position several systems away from Cthar space. The mood aboard the inevitable Dominion was somber, the usual efficient discipline replaced by a tense, fragile calm that threatened to shatter at the slightest provocation. Admiral Zalter had sequestered himself in his private quarters for hours after issuing the final retreat orders, emerging only when the fleet had reached safe harbor. The officers who saw him noted that he seemed to have aged years in the span of days, his formerly immaculate appearance now showing signs of neglect. When he finally called a command conference, the senior officers assembled with visible apprehension. None wished to be associated with such a catastrophic failure, yet protocol demanded their presence. Zalter entered the conference room last, moving to the head of the table with a stiffness that suggested physical pain. When he spoke, however, his voice carried the same authoritative tone they had always known, if somewhat hollowed by recent events. The official report to High Command has been transmitted. He began without preamble. I have taken full responsibility for the withdrawal decision. None of you will face censure for executing my orders. A ripple of surprise passed through the assembled officers. In consortium military culture, failure was rarely absorbed by a single individual. Blame typically flowed downward, with subordinates sacrificed to protect superiors. Commander Vex, seated at Zalter's right, cleared his throat cautiously. Admiral, while we appreciate your protection, the High Council will demand explanations that go beyond acceptance of responsibility. They will want to understand what we encountered. And what would you have me tell them, Commander? Zalter asked, his tone suddenly sharp. That the mythical humans, supposedly extinct for 4 millennia, appeared from nowhere with technology that rendered our most advanced fleet helpless? That they erased a destroyer from existence without apparent effort? That every strategic assumption upon which the consortium has built its power may be fundamentally flawed? The room fell silent. Put so bluntly, the reality of their situation seemed even more precarious. The High Council has ordered us to return to Capital Station immediately, Zalter continued after a moment. There, we will present all evidence and data collected during the encounter. Until then, all information regarding the specific nature of the opposing force is classified at the highest level. The official position is that we encountered an unknown entity of significant power that interfered with our pacification operation. And the Cthar asked the fleet's intelligence director, what is their status? Officially, their subjugation has been postponed pending assessment of the new security situation, Zalter replied. Unofficially, they now exist under the protection of a power that could likely obliterate the entire consortium with minimal effort. I suspect any future attempts to enforce our will upon them would be ill-advised. The admission of consortium weakness was unprecedented, especially from an officer of Zalter's rank and reputation. It sent a chill through the assembled. Commanders, sir, ventured the tactical officer who had witnessed the destroyer's destruction firsthand. What do you believe will happen next? Will these entities expand their intervention to other systems? Are we facing a potential war? Zalter's expression grew distant, as if seeing beyond the confines of the room to some darker future. I don't know, he admitted. The message they transmitted suggests they have no territorial ambitions, no desire for conquest. They intervened specifically to protect the Cthar, citing ancient agreements that predate the consortium itself. He paused, tapping a control that activated the room's holographic display. The image that formed showed the mysterious vessels as captured by the inevitable Dominion S sensors. But power of this magnitude cannot simply exist alongside the current order without fundamentally changing it. Even if these humans truly desire minimal interference, their mere presence alters everything. Every major power will now need to reassess their position, their plans, their assumptions about what is possible and what is permitted. Could we negotiate with them? Suggested the diplomatic liaison officer. Establish new protocols, boundaries? Perhaps, Zalter conceded. But negotiate from what position? What could we possibly offer an entity that seems to need nothing from us? What threats or incentives could influence a power that can delete our most advanced warships from existence? The question hung unanswered in the recycled air of the conference room. For now, Zalter concluded, we observe, we analyze, and we adapt. The consortium has faced challenges before. We will survive this one as well, though perhaps not unchanged. As the meeting disbanded, Junior Intelligence Analyst Marek found himself summoned to Admiral Zalter's private office, an unexpected development that filled him with equal parts curiosity and dread. Had his unauthorized database searches been discovered? When he entered the austere chamber, he found the Admiral standing before a viewport, gazing at the assembled fleet beyond. Zalter did not turn immediately, leaving Marek to wait in uncomfortable silence. You accessed classified historical records during the Cathar operation, Zalter finally said, still facing the viewport. Specifically, fragments relating to humanity and ancient communication protocols. Marek stiffened. Sir, I can explain. No explanation is necessary, Zalter interrupted, finally turning to face him. Your actions were technically outside protocol, but demonstrated initiative and insight that proved relevant. The Admiral moved to his desk, activating a secure data terminal. The High Council has established a special analysis group to assess the implications of recent events. Your name has been added to the roster at my recommendation. Marek struggled to hide his shock. Thank you, Admiral, but I'm only a junior analyst. With perspectives uninhibited by decades of consortium doctrine, Zalter noted, sometimes, fresh eyes see what experienced ones cannot. You recognized the significance of the signal when senior officers dismissed it. That capacity for independent thought may be valuable in the days ahead. He deactivated the terminal and fixed Marek with an intense gaze. The consortium faces an unprecedented situation. Our response will determine whether we adapt or become obsolete. Understanding our new counterparts will be essential to that adaptation. You believe we can coexist with them? Marek asked cautiously. Zalter's expression hardened. I believe we must find a way to do so, at least until we better comprehend what we're facing. The alternative is likely extinction. With that sobering assessment, he dismissed the young analyst, who left with the unsettling realization that his minor act of curiosity had altered the trajectory of his life, much as the Kthar's desperate plea had altered the trajectory of the galaxy. News of the consortium's unexpected withdrawal from Kthar space spread quickly throughout neighboring systems, though the exact circumstances remained shrouded in rumor and speculation. The consortium's official explanation, that operations had been temporarily suspended due to strategic considerations, satisfied no one familiar with their typical methods. When strange, impossibly large vessels were observed passing through normally busy trade routes without challenging or engaging any other ships, the rumors intensified. When the Kthar, rather than being subjugated or exterminated as expected, began receiving massive shipments of advanced materials and technology from unidentified sources, speculation reached fever pitch. Then came the message, transmitted simultaneously across all communication frequencies, in all major languages, reaching every inhabited world within 50 light-years of Kthar space. Asterisk, the silent vigil has ended. Humanity has returned to active oversight of protected regions. The covenants established before the silence remain in effect. Those who threaten protected species or civilizations will face intervention. Humanity seeks no territory, no resources, no subjugation, only compliance with the ancient agreements. Let those who would bring destruction remember, we are watching. Asterisk. The response varied by region, species, and political alignment. In the consortium core worlds, official channels dismissed the message as a hoax or psychological operation by unknown adversaries. Unofficial discussions, conducted in secure locations by the highest levels of leadership, took a decidedly different tone. In systems that had suffered under consortium expansion, the message was received with cautious hope. Ancient texts were revisited, historical archives unsealed, searching for references to these covenants and what protection they might offer. Among the more mystical species, the return of humanity was interpreted through religious frameworks, the fulfillment of prophecies, the return of ancient guardians, the beginning of a new cosmic age. On a remote mining colony at the edge of explored space, a gathering of representatives from various subjugated peoples met in secret, drawn together by the unprecedented opportunity the situation presented. "Is it true?" asked a delegate from the Viridian Coalition, her translucent skin pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that reflected her excitement. "Has humanity truly returned after all this time?" "The evidence suggests so," replied an elder of the Nyx Collective, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the dim light of the underground chamber. "Our deep space monitoring stations recorded the presence of vessels matching ancient descriptions of human craft. The power signatures were beyond our ability to properly measure. But can they be trusted?" demanded a representative of the Helios remnant, his metallic exoskeleton clattering as he gestured emphatically. Even in the old stories, humanity was unpredictable, sometimes benevolent, sometimes terrible in their judgment. "More trustworthy than the consortium, certainly," observed a Cathar diplomat, one of the few to have left their homeworld since the intervention. "They saved my people from extinction when no one else would, or could, help us." The gathering fell silent, considering this simple truth. Whatever humanity's nature, they had prevented a genocide that the rest of the galaxy had been prepared to ignore. "What do they want?" asked the Viridian eventually. Their message speaks of oversight and covenants, but offers little specificity. The Cathar diplomat spread his hands in a gesture of uncertainty. "Their representative told our elder that they wish minimal interference, that they withdrew millennia ago precisely because their presence was overwhelming the natural development of younger species. This intervention was made reluctantly, in response to our desperate activation of an ancient protocol. Yet they have chosen to announce their return widely," noted the Nyx elder. "This suggests they anticipate further need for intervention, or wish to prevent such need through deterrence," suggested another delegate. The Helios representative made a sound like metal scraping against stone, his species' equivalent of derisive laughter. A fine theoretical discussion, but it ignores the practical reality. The consortium will not simply accept this challenge to their authority. They will adapt, test boundaries, seek weaknesses. "Is there nature? And if no weaknesses exist?" asked the Cathar quietly. "You did not see what I saw. The consortium fleet, their pride, their symbol of absolute power, neutralized without apparent effort. A destroyer erased from existence as casually as wiping dust from a table. Even the strongest shield has gaps," insisted the Helios. "Even the most powerful entity has limitations. It is merely a question of finding them." "Then let the consortium waste their resources searching," said the Viridian, her skin flashing with patterns of determination. "Meanwhile, we have an opportunity unprecedented in generations, a counterbalance to consortium dominance. We should use this moment to build a coalition of our own, to establish ourselves as a legitimate third power in this new equation." The discussion continued late into the night, hope and skepticism mingling in equal measure. None could predict how the new galactic order would ultimately stabilize, but all agreed that the status quo had been irrevocably shattered. The return of humanity, silent watchers transformed into active guardians, had introduced a variable for which no existing political or military doctrine had prepared. The age of unchallenged consortium expansion had ended. What would replace it remained to be written. Elder Lyra stood on a newly constructed observation platform atop the restored repository of ancestral wisdom, watching as the twin moons of the Cthar homeworld rose above the horizon. The city below, devastated just weeks earlier by consortium bombardment, now hummed with activity as reconstruction proceeded at an astonishing pace. The resources provided by humanity had included not only advanced materials, but also automated construction systems that worked with tireless efficiency. Damaged buildings were repaired, infrastructure restored, and new structures erected according to traditional Cthar designs, but incorporating technologies centuries beyond their previous capability. Yet despite this miraculous recovery, Lyra found her thoughts troubled. The activation of the call had saved her people, yes, but at what cost to the wider galaxy? The delicate balance of power that had existed for centuries, however unjust it might have been, had provided a kind of stability. That stability was now gone, replaced by uncertainty and the looming presence of a power that even she, who had summoned it, could not fully comprehend. Commander Vorl joined her on the platform, his scales regaining some of their healthy iridescence after weeks of proper nutrition and reduced stress. He followed her gaze to the moons, standing in respectful silence for several moments before speaking. The last of the reconstruction units has been deployed to the southern continent, he reported. Initial estimates suggest complete restoration of all major settlements within 30 cycles. Remarkable, Lyra acknowledged. Our ancestors would have considered such rapid recovery miraculous. Vorl hesitated before continuing. We've also received reports from our diplomatic outposts. The consortium has established a quarantine zone around our system. No official traffic in or out. However, they've made no move to violate the boundary themselves. They're buying time, Lyra observed. Assessing, analyzing, planning their response. It is their way. Yes, Vorl agreed. But there's more. Several independent worlds, and even some consortium protectorates have sent unofficial envoys requesting information about our benefactors. Some speak of forming new alliances, of using this moment to break consortium dominance. Lyra sighed deeply, her age showing in the heaviness of her posture. And they look to us for leadership because we were the first to benefit from humanity's intervention. Is that not a position we should embrace? Vorl asked. For centuries, the Cthar have been marginalized, our influence in galactic affairs diminished. Now we have the opportunity to help shape a new order, one potentially more just and balanced than what came before. Perhaps, Lyra conceded, but we must move cautiously. Humanity's representative was clear. They have no desire to simply replace the consortium as the dominant force in galactic politics. Their intervention was specific and limited. We cannot assume they will support whatever coalition forms in the aftermath. Vorl considered this. Yet their mere existence changes everything. Even if they remain neutral in future conflicts, the knowledge that they could intervene, that there is a power greater than the consortium, fundamentally alters every calculation. True, Lyra agreed, and therein lies both opportunity and danger. The consortium ruled through absolute power and the belief that no force could challenge them. That belief is now shattered. The resulting vacuum will not remain empty for long. She turned from the view of the moons to face her military commander directly. We must be careful what we help create in the wake of this change, Vorl. The Cthar have always valued knowledge and understanding above conquest or dominance. Whatever shape the new galactic order takes, we should ensure it reflects those values. Vorl nodded slowly. I understand, Elder, but we cannot remain neutral indefinitely. Already, factions form among the liberated peoples. Some seek merely to establish defensive capabilities against future consortium aggression. Others speak of retribution, of using this moment to exact revenge for centuries of oppression. And what do you advise, Commander? Lyra asked, genuinely curious about the military leader's perspective. Vorl considered carefully before answering. I believe we should establish ourselves as moderates in this emerging landscape. Advocate for mutual defense agreements among independent worlds? Yes, but oppose aggressive action against the consortium. Seek stability through balance rather than merely inverting the previous power structure. Lyra felt a surge of pride in her commander's wisdom. Then we are of one mind on this. The cycle of dominance and resistance has perpetuated suffering throughout our history. If humanity's return offers anything beyond our immediate salvation, perhaps it is the opportunity to break that cycle, to establish a new paradigm based on coexistence rather than subjugation. Their conversation was interrupted by a young acolyte rushing onto the platform, his ceremonial robes fluttering with the speed of his approach. Elder Lyra, Commander, the artifact, it's activating again. They followed the acolyte to the secure chamber where the sphere that had transmitted the call now rested. As they entered, they saw that the object was indeed awake, its surface patterns glowing with the same blue energy that had preceded humanity's intervention. Unlike before, however, the sphere did not emit a signal outward. Instead, it projected a holographic display showing a region of space near the edge of the galaxy, a region where, according to the accompanying data, a fleet of consortium vessels was engaged in operations against a small, technologically primitive species unknown to the Cthar. As they watched, new signals appeared in the system, the now familiar signatures of human vessels emerging from whatever dimensional state concealed them during inactivity. The scenario played out as it had in Cthar space. The consortium fleet neutralized without destruction, a communication transmitted, the indigenous species preserved. It's happening again, Vorel observed quietly. Another intervention. Yes, Lyra confirmed. But notice, they're showing us this deliberately. The artifact is not merely activating randomly. It's providing specific information. But why? Asked the acolyte. What are we meant to do with this knowledge? Elder Lyra studied the holographic display thoughtfully. I believe we are being shown that the Cthar are not unique in receiving protection, that the covenants mentioned in humanity's message extend to multiple species across the galaxy. A demonstration that their commitment is genuine and widespread, Vorel suggested. And perhaps, Lyra added, a reminder that whatever coalition emerges in the wake of these changes, it should account for all protected peoples, not merely those with the strongest voices or greatest resources. The hologram shifted, showing another system where a similar intervention was occurring simultaneously. Then another, and another, a cascade of simultaneous actions across widely separated regions of space, all following the same pattern. How many? Vorel asked, his voice hushed with awe. 17 distinct interventions, Lyra counted. All concurrent, all following identical protocols. 17 species saved from destruction or subjugation in the span of a single day. The implications were staggering. Not only did humanity possess technology that rendered conventional military power obsolete, they had the capacity to deploy that power across vast distances simultaneously. The message to the consortium and anyone else who might consider aggressive expansion could not be clearer. As the holographic display faded, the artifact settling back into dormancy, Elder Lyra found her earlier concerns both validated and transformed. Yes, the activation of the call had unleashed forces beyond her control or full understanding. But witnessing the scale of humanity's commitment to protection rather than dominance suggested a future perhaps more hopeful than she had dared imagine. Prepare a communication to the diplomatic envoys, she instructed the acolyte. Inform them that the Cthar are prepared to host discussions regarding the formation of a mutual preservation accord among all peoples seeking stability in this new era. Emphasize that our goal is neither resistance nor aggression, but the establishment of sustainable coexistence. As the acolyte hurried away to execute her instructions, Lyra turned to Commander Vorel with renewed purpose in her ancient eyes. 4,000 years ago, humanity withdrew because their presence overwhelmed the independent development of younger species, she said. Now they have returned, reluctantly, because the alternative was extinction for many of those same species. Whatever mistakes led to the previous imbalance, we have an opportunity, perhaps even a responsibility, to help create a more equitable order in their wake. Vorel nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. Not merely preserved by their protection, but worthy of it. Exactly, Lyra agreed. For the Silent Ones have spoken again, and the galaxy will never be the same. In the vastness of space, the massive human vessels continued their vigilant presence, not conquering, not ruling, but watching. After 4,000 years of silence, humanity had been called back to a galaxy that had forgotten the true nature of their power. Now, that galaxy would need to learn to exist under their watchful gaze once more, not as subjects, but as protected wards of an elder race whose true nature remained as mysterious as the dark spaces between stars.